Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Palumbo, and welcome to my podcast, the Palumbo Podcast, where we interview some of the most successful self-made business owners, senior level executives, and partners. Today, I have with me my senior advisor of my firm, Mr. Bill Gordon. Bill Gordon has an undergrad from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and went to Harvard Business School. And for 20 years, he worked for some of the largest Wall Street firms and eventually started his own hedge fund that started with $1 million and grew to $1.2 billion. So we're lucky to have Bill with us today. Bill, thank you for agreeing to come on this podcast today.
Sure. Thank you, Phil. Thanks for having me.
So Bill, you have an incredible background, experience in Wall Street. You worked for some of the most, some of the largest Wall Street firms and eventually went on your own. But I just want to back up for a second. And I want to ask you, when you think about your childhood, was there anything, whether it was positive or negative, that impacted you, that helped you become the person you are today?
Well, obviously, Phil, I think, my parents shaped my childhood. So that was, that was a major factor. One of the things in my childhood that led me to, I guess, inherent in me is the ability to try to understand everything that I look at. So I used to take apart, everything from doorknobs. Then I became the plumber in the house, the electrician in the house. I couldn't keep my hands off of anything. And that led me to engineering school. But I was always very inquisitive as to how things worked and why they worked the way they did. And that's continued out through my life in business.
That's great. That's great. Is there anything specific, Bill, that you learned when you were younger that helped you with business, the way you think?
Well, I think it was really a combination of business school, combination of engineering school and business school. In engineering school, it really put a discipline into my way of thinking. In chemical engineering and all, serious engineering education is all about discipline, breaking down a problem into its component parts so that you can find a solution to that problem. And that was really essential. And only in retrospect did I realize how valuable that was in the way I approach life, problems, Wall Street, and anything that I face that's a challenge, you break it down into your component parts, look at what's wrong, and look how it can be better. Whether it's a client solution, an investment solution, or fixing a lamp in your house, it's all the same.
It's as I'm hearing you say this, right? So when it comes to me calling you up and saying, or we're having a meeting together and I say, Bill, what do you think about this? Or Bill, what do you think about that? It's never a quick answer from you. It's always, well, Phil, let's break it down. Its components. I can't give you an answer right away. Let's review the details of it. And that's what's great about working with you and you really advising the firm, because that mindset of that engineer mindset is so important, because you really do need to break everything down, compartmentalize it. And then from there, you make a decision on what route is the best route, which is really terrific. So I've noticed that in your mindset, which is real value add to what you're doing for us. So that's terrific. And which is interesting how you go from chemical engineering to Wall Street. So tell me a little bit about that, how that came about, versus taking another route with you in your career.
So I got to engineering school because, as I told you, I used to take everything apart in my house and try to put it back together. Some things didn't always get back together as a kid. So I thought, wow, and I got an A in chemistry. So it seems like engineering would be an interesting pursuit. And 3 years into it, I was like, I like the challenge, but I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to be sitting in the back in the lab playing with chemicals. I like to be out with people. And but my first job was my first job that I looked at was in sales. And my father had said to me, Bill, if you really want to work with people, why don't you try sales? If you like it, you can go on to business school. And, I really didn't know where I was headed. So I tried to get a sales job. And one sales job was, oh, we're going to pay you, commission and a draw. And I'm like, I can't do that. not going to take my future on, I don't even know if I can sell. And they said, no, Bill, you can sell. We know you can sell. Don't worry about it. You just have to pay us back. And I was so nervous. I said, no, I can't do that. And I took a salary job, and over 2.5 years became one of the leading salespeople in the company, and said, wow, I probably should have taken the comp job. I went back to business school with full intent of actually going back to chemical engineering. But I needed to have the argument as to why I thought they were doing it wrong.
Right.
And then my roommate said, hey, you should think about going to Wall Street because you can make a lot of money. And one thing led to another, and that's how I ended up on the street. I was looking for a growth opportunity because if you're in sales, you certainly want a stagnant industry.
Yeah.
And Bill Gates had just started Microsoft, and so I was saying computers could be interesting, but I didn't have an electrical engineering degree. And so I got a job on Wall Street, and so there you were able to go out and sink or swim, make the money if you're successful, and if you're not, you didn't. But I was very comfortable at that point in time, having had that sales experience in chemistry, in chemicals, to be able to. I felt confident in myself that I could do it.
So the years that you worked on Wall Street for some of the biggest banks, what did you learn? What did you take out of that? Before going into you starting your hedge fund, when you were there, what are some key things that you learned, whether positive or negative, that you can share with us?
Well, I learned the business, right? I went into 1981. I went into Wall Street really kind of green on the finance business. And I learned the entire business, and for that, it was very helpful, particularly being in the institutional side of the business. It was a very serious, intensive training ground. So I realized that, but I started to learn that I wanted to be more entrepreneurial. I always found myself doing something different on the cutting edge of a marketplace, and I enjoyed that. And so I started seeing more and more that eventually I would go into my own business. But the other thing I learned is you need the opportunity to do that. And those opportunities, or the best opportunities, don't show up all the time. So you can't just, yes, you can just decide to go into your own business, but I guess from a risk adjusted standpoint, I picked the opportunities where I saw the windows being the most attractive, and they come along once in a while, but they don't come along every day.
So when you were working at the time, was it Merrill Lynch, I believe, or
yes, I was at Merrill Lynch.
Merrill Lynch, right? So when you were at Merrill Lynch and you were thinking about starting your own hedge fund, going off on your own, at the time, how old were your children about?
Well, I had two experiences on crossing the new business bridge. One was I had no kids. I was 5 years into the business, and with a client of mine, we were going to launch not really a hedge fund, but an asset management firm. And I found myself less than I wanted to be prepared to do that. And so in the process of doing that, my partner got cold feet and went off and did something else. And I was really
this was 5 years. So 5 years
into my Wall Street career. It was
your Wall Street
1986.
In 1986, got it.
1986. I was 31. I didn't have kids yet, and I was nervous. I was trying to get it together, and I didn't get it together fast enough, and the opportunity went away, and I was angry at myself for missing that opportunity. And it was only subsequent to leaving my second job, which was second job in my career was at Payne Weber, that I had the opportunity. Another opportunity came to launch a business, and I was convinced that I had to do it. I did not want to go to my grave having passed up two opportunities.
I know how it feels. Yeah.
And I said, I got to go, and I got to do it now. And we started out with 750 grand and grew it to $1.2 billion. And it was a great experience. I'm glad that I took the leap and did it. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to my wife. She was very confident that I would be successful, and it, it turned out to be a very rewarding experience.
So at the time of launch of your new hedge fund, how old were your children then?
So was it 19, I was 47, about 15, 13, I think.
Right. So you taking that leap of faith was a pretty big step, right? Because things could have
Yes.
went wrong. And so walk me through what that felt like, right? Married, children, 13, 15, so still young. You're leaving a major Wall Street firm, you're leaving a salary, you're going off on your own. Tell me, how did you build the confidence and courage to do that?
Well, it was helped, there was the PaineWebber. I worked at PaineWebber at the time. It was sold to UBS. So it was an opportunity for a cash out. So I did have a financial buffer. So from that standpoint, that was one of those windows that just popped up. And I decided to take it. I took it, I went off, and I was trying to develop a number of different things. And I got together with an old somebody that I work with at PaineWebber, and I saw it very clearly that this was the opportunity to go for it, and I did. Again, because going back to the first time when I passed up on it, I felt I just needed to do this, and you can't just, when you decide you're going to do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the best opportunity in front of you. So you need to be thinking about it and looking, constantly observing what's in front of you. And if you're aware and you're looking, it will come by. And then it's a question of, taking that leap.
So when you think about, this is what my audience to know, right? So there were two opportunities. There was a first opportunity when you were 5-6 years into the business, and then there was another opportunity. What was different between the first opportunity and then the final opportunity that gave you the courage to make that jump?
Actually, I think, Phil, they were pretty much the same. There was actually more risk in the second one because I was really starting out. Well, there was risk in both of them, but I would say there was more risk in the second one because I was doing something that Wall Street was not accustomed to, which was forecasting interest rates. And as you know, because you're in the business, almost nobody does it well. And accidentally, they didn't tell my partner that we couldn't do it. So we went out and did it. The first one was a traditional money management opportunity that was very much, would have fit the standard buying pattern of major institutions. So there was actually more risk in the second one. And I had a lot of people who told me, Bill, it's not going to work. No one's going to pay you to do it. And in the end, you got to come to your own conclusion. You got to say, in my gut, do I think I'm going to be able to work this thing through? And it is going back to that engineering mindset of breaking down the component parts. Who's doing what? Who's not doing what? Can this be done? And, but the drive to be able to do that was always there after my first experience. And I just saw it as the opportunity to go.
Phil, would you say it's, because I know how I felt when I was thinking about it and then finally made that leap. For me, it was just that gut feeling that I knew this was right for the client. I knew this was right for my career as I thought about it for the rest of my career. So it was obvious, there's obviously the math of it, right? All the breaking it down, compartmentalizing it. But then also I just felt like my gut was like, you got to do this, right? So somebody who's listening to this, who may want to do what you did and essentially what I did, what type of advice would you give them?
Well, I think, you really want to understand whatever product or service you're delivering, what's the value added proposition to the buyer? Okay. And make sure that the value added proposition to the buyer is a very positive one. Okay. Whether you're delivering a service or a product, or in the case of, Wall Street, it's a return, in this case, risk adjusted return. Do I think we could get an attractive risk-adjusted return using bonds that was much more attractive than owning the bond itself? And the answer was yes, substantially higher. And I could eliminate some of the risk of owning bonds where interest rates go up and you lose money, because this was a strategy that I was confident, was able to outperform the bonds in a bad market as well as a good market. So it would deliver absolute return. And so that, you have to come to that conclusion that the value proposition you're offering your client and the client base itself is big enough that you'll be able to, the value's there enough for somebody to say yes. If there's not enough value there, then it'll be a much harder sell.
No, I love that. So you're saying the big thing for anybody who's thinking about making that leap, whatever business it is what's the value add to the client, right? That you feel such conviction about, that's going to set you apart.
Right. And I will say, coming out of business school, that's probably the biggest thing I learned is the value proposition. What's the value proposition to your clients? Okay. So they come to you and they want you to manage their money. There's several value propositions you're delivering, and as we talked about it, one of them is a rate of return, but more importantly, it's a peace of mind, right?
Absolutely.
That's the value proposition.
Right.
And sometimes people don't think that that's a value proposition, but it really is. And I only saw that as I got older. It's not just, hey, I got 10% or 12%, but the value proposition, I have peace of mind in my finances. And then how do you develop that? And you have to build that value proposition to be able to deliver that peace of mind.
Yeah, love that.
You really have to think about that. And if the value proposition isn't substantive enough and strategic enough in terms of other people being able to come in and encroach in your game, then you have to, you may want to rethink that. I was highly confident in both cases when I started this, that we had a value proposition that was not easily replicable by other people. And so trying to do, if, a no Italian restaurant with 10 in town is a high risk. But if you're coming in with a Argentinian restaurant, no one's got it, at least you're differentiating yourself.
Right.
And in both cases, the value proposition for me was extremely high and substantially better than the alternatives that the average institutional client was looking at the time.
And it worked. So you launched your own hedge fund, right? Now you're sitting in your new world. At what point did you say to yourself, you know what, this worked, or this was the right move? How long did it take to feel like this is it? That was the right decision that I made.
What, within launching the company?
Correct. From day one alone.
Well, I'd say probably the first 2 years, raising $100 million and achieving that seemed to be impossible when we started with $700,000.
Wow.
But we started bringing in large institutions, and we were making serious money. Our first full year in business, we generated a 20% return, which was very substantive. And so I saw that my assessment of the value proposition we were offering was, in fact, an accurate one.
Wow.
And people came to us, for that. And so it was that assessment that just reaffirmed my thought process, kind of every time you look at something. What's the value proposition? And why is the buyer better off? And because if they're not, you're going to struggle. And because you're not going to get the buyers to make the easy. It's not going to be that easy for them to get to switch.
So Bill, you nailed it on the value proposition. So now when you were working at the Wall Street banks in terms of work ethic and hours you put in versus when you were on your own, share with the audience, what did that look? What was your schedule like? What was your routine like when you had your own firm?
Well, the funny thing is, Phil, I think my routine, and my wife would probably tell you this, my routine was no different. I was working 24/7 no matter where I was.
Right.
In the second case, I owned the company. In the first case, I didn't. So,
but when it comes to work,
which is one of the reasons why I started it, because it's, I like that. I enjoy it. I look at the world that way. And I find myself constantly immersed in, how do I make it better? How do I make it different? What can I improve? And that unfortunately in my mind goes 24/7. And and I applied that when I was working for somebody else. But if you're truly that way, applying it for yourself is the most fruitful. And in fact, fruitful from a number of aspects. One, financial, but also two, just for yourself, right? The achievement. And I know you feel that way in having founded your firm, to be able to say, yes, I'm out here, I'm doing it, I'm helping clients, and you're delivering a value proposition that they don't find other places. And there's a lot of people out there competing with you, but part of the value proposition is yourself. Part of it is your discipline and your structure and being able to pull it all together, because it is a multifaceted problem to manage money, in today's world and wealth management.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say it, the word 24/7. I was going to interrupt you before and say get specific, but what all of us mean and what you said by 24/7, the reality is that when I was working for the Wall Street banks, I almost felt like I was in a cage, right? Where you can't get out, and
Right.
you're limited to whatever's in that world, that cage. And then when you branch out on your own, all of a sudden it's this whole new life, and it does something to your body inside, the energy it gives you, and you don't stop. I mean, I was always like this before, but now it's like it brings you to a whole nother level. So it's not like you're figuratively saying 24/7. But the reality is, I mean, obviously there's only a certain amount of, we have family, we have children to attend to, things like that, but you never stop, because it's always about that value add proposition. How can I make that better? How can I make myself better? Right. As we think about the firms going forward. So
Right.
I totally
I would say, Phil, one of the things, and I actually, gave it some thought over the last few months, because I'm being offered I was offered a business leader award. And in thinking about approaching that award, I like disruption. I like change. And so I'm always looking for an opportunity to change something for the better, right? Whether it's, when I was growing up as a kid, trying to fix whatever I was trying to fix, trying to make it better.
Right.
And so you're always thinking about that. If you're thinking that way, you're always thinking about that, and everything you face is, oh, wait, I think I could make this better. And so I found myself going into disruptive opportunities and being very comfortable about it, being the disruptor or investing in disruptive opportunities, because most people like the status quo, right? And they like to be comfortable, and they don't like change.
Of course.
And I can relate to that, but it's just not me.
Right. I agree with you. So Bill, you started your own firm, you grew it from 750,000. I said $1 million to start off the podcast, but 750,000, grew it to 1.2 billion. When you got to 1.2 billion, or over $1 billion, did you ever take a step back and said, oh my gosh, I took this leap of faith and I had this value proposition I felt I could deliver to the world. I did it, and here I am at over $1 billion. Oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like, did you ever take a step back to say to yourself, wow, that's, what an accomplishment. I can't believe that. Not that you can't believe, because you must have believed it because you took the leap of faith. But what did it feel like once you got to that level?
Yeah, it's funny, Phil. I didn't really do it on my own. I mean, I just kept, because I was like, okay, where's the next billion coming from?
It never ends, right?
It never ends. And I don't think it, whether it doesn't end. If you're thinking that way, it doesn't end. It's actually, when I stepped back, is I was talking to a consultant, and he was talking to me, and he said, you realize, Bill, only 3% of the funds that start ever get to $1 billion.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, really? It seems like everybody has $1 billion. And keep in mind, this was 2010. Today, it even more so. Seems like everybody's got $1 billion. We lose perspective, but the answer is there are a lot of people out there, and they just don't ever get to that.
When you were at 750,000, the thought of $1 billion, Did you think you could achieve that?
I didn't, I would never say I could never do it, right? I just didn't, I wasn't focused on a billion. I was focused on, I want to get to 100 million and then we'll see from there. But so I just kept my head down and going. I certainly didn't think it was impossible. No, I absolutely did believe, because again, I start with the value proposition and I
Right.
look at what's out there and I'm saying, well, this is that good, then it should be at least $1 billion. Okay. And so it really wasn't a shocker that I got there, because I think we did what we said we were going to do. And in doing that, the market responded accordingly. So, I never put a cap on any of my objectives, because, I think the answer is, if you're successful, you want to keep going. You don't want to be able to, have it peak. As I've told you before, the first 100 million was a lot more fun. And the reason it was more fun is because it was more challenging.
Right.
Because, once you get to $1 billion, everyone's like, oh, you're at $1 billion, that's a no-brainer. It's not a no-brainer at 750,000, right? Or at 10 million or something. But at that time, it's you versus the world.
Right.
And that challenge is actually exciting, as crazy as it might seem. Everybody's not wired that way, right? That doesn't necessarily, that could scare most people.
Yeah.
But you need to be confident, again, in your value proposition and the market, and can this actually take place? Would I be the buyer? And I think one of my successes is putting myself in a buyer's shoes. Would I buy that based on what I see in the marketplace? And if I concluded that I'm not sure, then I couldn't find myself, I wouldn't be a good salesman for trying to sell that.
Of course, it's all about conviction and what we do, and conviction comes with research and educating, being a student of your career and what you're doing, and
Right.
taking that conviction, bringing it to the world, and then the energy and the business will just come from that. Really, like I
Right.
always say to people all the time, it's really about, people lose track where they think more about how much money can I make, where it should be more about what's your passion, what are you going to deliver to the world, and focus on helping people. And in the end, money will follow you.
It will follow you. It will follow you. And
yeah.
money, the opportunity for me was, why did I go into Wall Street and why did I go down that road, is because I can make a lot of money. But once you got going on that, then I just put your head down and keep going. So
Right.
It wasn't like how much you made every year. It was the opportunity that you could, one, get paid for what you do, right? That's kind of, for me, critical. And if I can't do it, I don't expect to get paid. If I can get it done, I want to get paid. And I want the compensation to flow from it. And when you run your own business, that is your deal, right? If you're good and you can deliver a good value proposition, the world will respond and you will be compensated. And
I agree. So Bill, someone who's listening to this, right, that maybe has a vision of what they would like if they snap their fingers, on the way they would like their career to, or what they would want their career to look like. But maybe they have some doubt, or somebody's telling them there's no way you can do it, etc.
Right.
What would you say to that person to get them to move and just do it?
Well, so you need that conviction, Phil, that you talked about. And so there were plenty of people who told me, Phil, this will not work. No one will pay you to do this. And you can't just literally take that. You have to analyze it and ask them, why do you think I'm going to, well, because no one else is doing it. Well, that to me is not a good reason, right? A good reason is because you're not delivering the value. But if you're delivering the value, you have the opportunity to be compensated. Just because nobody has done it before doesn't mean it can't be done. Okay. And so listening to, I would bet that no one will have an idea or an opportunity where you can't find, at least 30, 40, 50% of the people usually who say it can't be done, because those are the risk averse people and they don't see it. I mean, I would say, one, I see a value proposition and I see a vision. And the vision is that value proposition is extensive and can be scaled, right? And most people don't have that, and that's fine, and they don't need it. But I recognized after 4 or 5 times trying to do new things that when they played out the way I expected, that I was pretty good at seeing that and being able to pull a lot of random dots together and say, this is the way to go. But you will need that, but to just, you have to expect people are going to tell you it's not going to work. Right. How many people do you think told Elon Musk it isn't going to work? You can't be General Motors, right? You can't be, go down the list of people that have changed and brought disruptive technology or disruptive service. Everybody was saying, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's not going to work, Bill. It's not going to work, and you need to then go back look, with insight into yourself and the marketplace and do what I said, analyze that value proposition and conclude for yourself, is in fact that would I buy it? Do other people who I know would buy it? And is this doable and is it repeatable and sustainable?
Yep.
And so you will have to, you'll have to go against a lot of people telling you it's not going to work. But
absolutely, that's just the way it works.
But that's why the opportunity is there in disruption. New technology and emerging technology has always been a place where a lot of people make a lot of money. A lot of people lose a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And so it's high risk and you get paid for it if you're right. But, in most cases, in every case, I would guess, there's a large percentage of the people that if you polled them would say it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. We can't get to the moon. Right.
Right. So Bill, in terms of risk, like you talked about before, you mentioned the word risk adverse, right? So going back to, again, helping the audience that's listening in and who may want to start and take that leap like you did and I did, help them understand risk, right? So you take that leap, but you do have to measure some sort of risk. So you had a family, you had children. If it didn't work out, right, I'm assuming you thought of, if this didn't work out, here's the backup plan, right? So I always look at life like, here's the worst case scenario, yes, here's the best case scenario, and anything else in between is kind of sort of gravy, right? But I did know my worst case scenario, which wasn't that bad of a scenario.
Right.
That's not really true. So worst case scenario could have been bad if, fortunately we were, we have integrity in terms of the way we left UBS. We didn't take any client records and we just left and said goodbye. And we called our clients, which we were allowed to do. And then, and so we did everything by the book. If we didn't, as other advisors have done in the past, then that would have been the worst case scenario where, you could really lose everything. So fortunately we had integrity, right? But so as you're talking to someone who's thinking about taking that leap, how should they think about risk?
Well, I think, there's part of it is a practical side, Phil, right? So in my case, because of the change in, control at PaineWebber, I ended up having a mitigating factor of, having some capital that I could rely on while I, had kids in school. I was facing college bills, in the next few years, right. But I was able to take that risk. So you have to be able to do that. There are some people who are, comfortable just really going out without any financial backing,
right,
or financial offset. I didn't. And I think, look, after being in the business for as long as I was, I felt I had developed a confidence that I could find something else to do. If I really felt that I was capable of running my own business, I could certainly go find work and go work for somebody else.
Yeah.
But I really, at that point, wanted to give it, I wanted to give it a shot on my own. But I look at that, I don't consider myself a high risk person. Okay. I thought that that was a reasonably low risk trade because, look, if I was 47 years old, as you get older in Wall Street, the risk of being able to stay there goes up, right?
Right.
And when I left chemical engineering and I left the chemical business coming out of Harvard, and I went into Wall Street, and my mother-in-law was panicked. Oh my God, Wall Street. Meanwhile, the chemical company I was working for ended up getting merged out of existence. So if I had gone back there and stayed there within 2 years, I probably had lost my job.
Wow.
So it looked really comfortable at the time, but that road wasn't the risk averse road. I was jumping on a growing business, and you have to be confident enough that you're capable of operating in that. So risk has got many different facets.
Right.
And some of them you're not in control of. Like, so in the case of that chemical company, I would not have been in control of it. And I could have been the best person in the world, but it's not under my control.
Right. And people, I mean, when it comes to risk, people, like, just like when I manage people's money, right? Everybody has a different type of risk tolerance inside of them. So if you're thinking about taking that leap as we did, you have to understand your worst case scenario, and it may be a high risk worst case scenario, and you may be that high risk person who's comfortable with that. I mean, look at Elon Musk, right? After he sold PayPal, you mentioned him before, he could have took the money and bought an island and called it a day. Instead, he put all his money into Tesla and SpaceX. And then 2008, Tesla almost went bankrupt, and he ended up funding it and ended up working out for him, which was great. So, but obviously he's one who's a risk taker. So everybody's completely different. So I want to pivot, Bill, to talk about, and you mentioned it before, Harvard Business School. You learned the value-added proposition was something you learned when you were in Harvard. What else can you tell us that you learned when you're in Harvard Business School that would be value-added?
Well, I think, the other big component of it is looking at an industry and from a strategic standpoint. At that point in time, they were specialists and probably leading school in business strategy and looking at, your strategy versus other strategies and where you fit in the mix of businesses in an industry. And so that would probably be the other component. I think I have a good strategic view of when I'm thinking of a decision, I'm looking at it strategically as well, not just tactically. And so when I founded the hedge fund, I looked at the industry, I looked at the strategies that were out there, different components, and so there was a value-added proposition, but there wasn't a real serious competitor. And it's a lot of people don't like to deal with something where there's nobody else in the market because then you can't see it.
Right.
As soon as there's 3 or 4 people, everyone's like, oh, well, that's good. Oh, is that what you're doing? But if you're the first one out there, right? They're like, well, what are you doing? Who can I compare you to? And I'm like, well, not really anybody. And they're like, what? Well, I can't really analyze this if I can't. And I can tell you, we had that question brought to us at least 100 times. Well, who else are your competitors? Well, there's no one really doing it like we're doing it. And that for them was unfortunately nerve-wracking because they couldn't compare it to anything other than other managers that were doing something different. I look at it like, well, you're getting me and I'm doing something different than everyone else and I'm doing better. Why wouldn't you like that? But the risk-averse nature of most people are, no, I don't want to take that risk. I'll wait for somebody else to do it.
Right.
We see that in financial services all the time.
Yeah.
And that I want to be in there after the 5th person's doing it. The problem in financial services is that the more people are doing it, the lower the return, right? So actually, you don't want anyone coming after you. You want to be doing it in the corner by yourself where no one sees you. And unfortunately, that's the buying public in financial services is much more comfortable buying a big multi-billion-dollar or $100 billion opportunity. But what kind of opportunity it is when they have $100 billion, right? It has to be a pretty big one to get an excess rate of return.
Right.
So So, so I'd say strategy was my other component that I developed, the value proposition and the strategy, and you put the two together. I think they're pretty critical as you approach any industry and start something. And again, Phil, going back to the value proposition, as I talked about in this, getting this award, look for disruption. I would tell people to look for disruption, and you'll think about these ideas, but then really analyze the value proposition that's coming out of the disruption. And is it sustainable? And that's the strategy. In other words, if I'm going to come up with something that 15 other people can come up with, they'll eventually do it. And then you're going to be competing with them. You're going to need a runway to be able to stay ahead of that game. You can't just sit there and do the same thing. And this is more true in business than it's ever been before. You don't have that big window for a long period of time to make something and allow it to go. Somebody's going to come along with something different, and you're going to need to be on top of it and be prepared, to counter it with your value proposition.
So this next chapter of your life, after you left the hedge fund business, you found, so this disruption, which you constantly say all the time. Congratulations, by the way, on your business leadership award that you're going to be receiving shortly, which I look forward to attending. So we talk about disruption a lot. So tell me about the boat business. What opportunity you saw there?
Okay. Well, right behind me in this picture is one of the disruptive forces. The boat business, for the longest time, to go boating, you needed to own one. Okay. And that was true of an airplane, but that's no longer true of airplanes. And now it's no longer true of boating. And the boating business was actually one of the last discretionary opportunity businesses to go that way. But, I think I was going back to the days of Merrill Lynch back in the 80s. A friend of mine, who in fact I was just on the phone with, took me out on a sailing venture out in Newport Beach. And I said, well, was this your boat? And he goes, no, I'm a part of a club. Club? Club. So no, I'm part of a boating club. I paid, at the time, $100 to use the boat for the day, And he said, I pay $600 a year. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? That's unbelievable. He jumps on the boat. It's all clean. He goes out on the boat, drops it off, and goes away. I'm like, this is the way to boat. And I had that opportunity to buy that business with my son in 2013, and felt that eventually this would occur, that people would go to, use of boats through a club or through rental, because nobody uses a boat, not nobody, but most people do not use a boat all the time because life gets in the way. And so the business has evolved in the last 8 years, where now the largest boating manufacturer has bought the largest boat club. And they need that because they need to be able to follow where the trend is going.
Right.
People aren't necessarily buying the boats. They're part of a boat club or they're renting. And, I went, I guess probably 4 or 5 years ago, went to Sweden, or my son went to Sweden, I should say, at a boat show. Same thing. The boat manufacturer said, and this is your value proposition in work. The boat manufacturer said, you can buy it, you can lease it, you can rent it, or you can join our club. Which one would you like? So that's, as a buyer, now your value proposition is, I can do anything you want.
Right. As
opposed to, you got to lay out 150 grand for a new boat. So I just felt for sure that over time that was going to change, because boat prices would continue to go.
And it's been an incredible success. And anybody a bunch of buddies of mine who own boats, I was telling them I was interested in buying a boat, but then I talked about, your club, et cetera. And then they said right away, Phil, join Long Island Boat Rental. It makes so much sense. You'll save so much money, a lot less headache and all that type of stuff. And it was, and it is a great experience, working with you with Long Island Boat Rental. Yeah.
The biggest payoff was my son, who really runs a business completely now, said to me the other year, he says, you were right, Dad. It did go that way.
Yeah. And you are right. It really is incredible. Everybody talks about it, Long Island Boat Rental in town.
And it's not done. It's not done. This boat is a result of a value proposition. We had people calling us for hey, I want to take 25 people out or 24 people out. I don't want to go on a 100-person with 100 of my best friends. I want to have a personal private yacht experience, and I don't want it to be a fishing trawler, you know. And so my son said, look, we're gonna build this boat. And it was no mean feat on this, because that's a commercial grade boat. And when you build a commercial grade boat, it's substantively more involved than just an individual recreational boat.
Right.
And yet, you know, it's been, you know, everybody who uses it, you know, it's only in its first season, but everybody uses it, loves it. And you're going to see more of it. It's the industry is evolving now, and the last COVID has really set it off. And so now you've seen all of these changes come through the boating business, and you're going to see even more. And the other value proposition, Phil, is most people like to be on the water. They, you know, 90% of the people like to be on the water.
Absolutely.
But they don't go on the water.
Right.
And they don't go because they don't have a boat, or
Right.
they don't know somebody who doesn't have a boat.
Right.
Or, you know, or it's just not there for them to partake of, and they don't know how to use a boat. Well, that's no longer the case. You know, you don't need to drive either. You just call Uber. So now, literally, you don't need to have a boat. You just call up somebody and say, I'd like to go out on a boat. I get, you know, 10 people and we want to go have a party. Fine. Just show up at the dock. If you want food, we'll arrange it for you. I mean, it's just, but that's the way life is now, right?
Absolutely.
That
It's
is
all
the
about
value
that.
proposition. The value proposition is, I don't know what to do on Saturday. Can you help me?
Listen, I could tell you, you know, for me, you know, I have three boys, as you know, and between sports and work with me, life gets in the way. Even if I owned a boat right now, I would probably, first of all, I have lacrosse every single weekend, and we have tournaments all the way to the middle of July. So then after middle of July to the end of August, really the only time I'd be able to maybe even use it. Plus, you know, you'll go away on vacation, et cetera. So, you know, it's exactly what you said. We live such busy lifestyles today. So your service is really excellent. My last question for you, Bill. So also, obviously, you're senior advisor to my firm, right? So as you looked at the financial services world, staying with being disruptive, what did you see in the financial services world that was eye-opening to you as you think about, you know, what we're accomplishing and our mission is going forward?
Right. So, Phil, and I experienced this for myself. Again, when you experience it for yourself, it's usually much more valuable and you can appreciate it more. But people would never, well, first of all, they're not even able to, but they would never think about building a house without an architect and a contractor. Both are licensed entities, okay? And they're licensed for a very good reason, because if they're not, you have a problem. In the financial services business, everybody's licensed, okay? But it's not a requirement that you have a financial architect, which I would call a financial planner, and a financial contractor, which I would consider a wealth manager, okay? And you need both of those to really be successful. And yet most people don't have a full-blown component of each of those put together to manage their financial plan. And life has never been easy, and I don't suspect in the next decade it's going to be easier at all. Having come off a pretty good run in the stock market, financial planning I just view as essential, and I mean it very detailed financial planning,
Right.
in the way that you do, you know, what you call your one plan, okay, and organizing people's financial life, looking at all of the data and understanding, okay, my Social Security, my insurance, my cost of operations, what do I want to pass on to my kids? All of those issues need to be put into an integrated plan, taken into account of, and then see, does this work? Can I get there from here? If I can, I achieve what, you know, I talked about before, which is peace of mind. And I believe that that's really what people are looking for in the financial services business. And I don't think everybody's really delivering it. And some people are, but many people are not, and many people don't either, or their providers are not insisting on a plan, or they're afraid to do a plan. But the answer is you wouldn't build a house without it. You can't build a house without it. Shouldn't be able to build a retirement, or, as you said, make work optional. Understand your finances in a way that's very sophisticated and yet brought to you in English, which is what you do, and which is why I think that is a disruptive force in wealth management and still has a long way to run.
I totally agree. So and if you remember, I'm sure you do, you and I were having a conversation, and I said to you, I said, Bill, I said, the concept of a financial plan, and you said has been around since the mid 80s. I said the past 20 years, and we both agreed that the concept of financial planning has been around for as long as it's been around. But many of Wall Street firms were using a financial plan in a way to sell clients other types of products. It was never really a genuine service that they were offering, I've always felt, right?
Mhm.
And then you said to me, well, Phil, financial planning, yes, has been around for that long, as you knew that because you were in Wall Street firms as well. But then you said, and I agreed, and we talked about it, and we said that, well, 95% or more people don't have a financial plan, don't actually have a written financial document, right? And this is you and I just talking to each other. It's not like we're trying to sell anybody anything. It's you and I just talking and strategizing, et cetera. And then you said to me, you said, Phil, you said, because it's never, the messaging has never been the correct messaging to the people. And that's why 95% of people do not have a financial plan. And you and I know, just like you mentioned before, an architect and a contractor, we know it's one of the most important documents that people could have. And I say this all the time. And when we talked about this, we said it. A financial plan is not something somebody needs to have to get through life. There are many people that go through life without a financial plan, which we agree to. But by having a financial plan, it will help maximize your wealth over time and make a tremendous difference, right? So there's such an importance to a financial plan. The problem is the message going out to people has not been strong enough. But that's the mission, one of the missions of our firm, what we're trying to do together as we think about disrupting, the financial services world.
Well, there's a tremendous, so as I said, going back to our value proposition, the value proposition in a financial plan is significant. It's not necessarily clear when you go into it, okay? But when you've gone through, several, as I have, in every case, the value proposition that's come back at me was something that I didn't expect when I went in.
Right. Absolutely.
And it didn't come out with it had nothing to do with my financial assets.
Right.
Well, it ended up in the financial assets, but it was divorced from that. One was an insurance trust. The other one was, you should use a Roth IRA, and, tax is more of an accounting issue. I didn't see it going in. I didn't expect it. I was expecting just a very, standard, discussion about the investments. It totally turned me around and said, oh my gosh, this financial plan was a substantive change in my wealth preservation going forward. And I didn't even see it going in.
Yeah.
Right. And so that kind of value proposition is huge. And I think today that the people that don't enter that don't see that actually could come out. And the answer is you don't know when you go in, because you can't, as I said, you can't do this in your head.
Correct.
Okay. You're talking about, is it 3% inflation or 7% inflation? Today, we're not even sure which one it is. You're talking about Social Security. You're talking about asset growth. You're talking about lives and how long you're going to live. All of those things are all variable. Some of them are known, some of them are not. And unless you put it all together in one tight package, you can't assess it and have somebody be the quarterback. In your case, right, your personal chief financial officer, because that's what we're missing in life, right? Look at the medical side. We have. I was just joking with somebody the other day. I have like 5 ologists that I have to report to, right? Where's the quarterback?
I was just going to say that. Where's the quarterback? Where's the quarterback?
Where's the quarterback? Now, I have a quarterback, but the point is that's a critical role. That used to be our physician, and now we're all running around with the ologists. My partner at the hedge fund, he said to me, I have 14 doctors, and one of his friends who was a doctor said, but you don't have a quarterback. And no one's looking at the pieces.
Right.
And that's what is needed, and that's what the financial plan does.
Absolutely.
It pulls all of those pieces together.
Absolutely.
And listen, we all know that the pieces are out there, but we don't know how they fit together. And that creates this, uncertainty. And when you put it all together and you come out in a plan, you can say, okay, I know this all works together, and I'm going to get there from here.
Love it, Bill. I love it, Bill. Love it, Bill. So, Bill, listen, I want to say congratulations on all your success in life. I mean, and everything you've had at this point. You've been a tremendous value to my firm. We appreciate all that you do. Congratulations on your business award that you'll be receiving next week. We're very happy to be there, support you. And for those who are listening, I'd say there was a lot that we got out of today, but really the 2 or 3 things to think about as you think about maybe starting your own business is, number 1, is what you're going to bring to the world going to be disruptive? Number 2, what value proposition are you going to bring to the world that's going to be disruptive? And then number 3, understand the risk that you're exposed to when you make that leap of faith. Bill, those are the 3 things that I got from you. I thought was really awesome. So again, Bill, thank you very much for your time today. Look forward to seeing you soon. And
let's go out and disrupt the world.
Let's go disrupt the world, as we always been doing. And we will do for many years to come.
Yep.
Be well, Bill.
You longer than me, probably.
You'll be around. You'll be around. Just stay with the ologist and you'll be around.
Yeah, exactly.
Take care. Be well.
Okay, be good. Thank you, Phil.
All right. Bye, everybody.